The text message hit my phone at 11:47 p.m. like a slap across the face. "Stop calling, you're annoying." I stared at those 4 words, sitting in my worn leather recliner with a half-empty beer growing warm in my hand. Rina hadn't been home in 3 days. 3 days of emergency meetings and client dinners that somehow required her to stay at hotels across town. 3 days of me being the understanding husband, nodding along to her increasingly creative excuses. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Joel Carver, and I'm 36 years old. I fix cars for a living, which means I know when something's running rough long before the engine fades completely. My marriage had been making strange noises for months. I scrolled through our text history, watching the conversation fade away over the past 2 weeks. Her responses had gone from paragraphs to sentences to single words to nothing at all. Classic signs of a failing transmission, if you ask me. "Won't call again," I typed back, then set the phone on the coffee table next to a stack of bills and a framed photo from our wedding 5 years ago. We looked so damn happy in that picture. Rina in her white dress, me in my only good suit, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. Now she thought I was annoying. The house felt too quiet without her constant chatter about work drama and office politics. Rina managed 3 retail stores in the downtown district, which meant she dealt with entitled customers, lazy employees, and a boss who treated her like his personal assistant. At least, that's what she told me. I picked up my phone again and opened the location-sharing app we'd set up 2 years ago after she got mugged in a parking garage. "For safety," she'd said, "so we always know where each other are." The little blue dot showed her location. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel, the most expensive place in our Rust Belt city, where rooms started at $300 a night, way above our pay grade. My stomach dropped like a wrench through my fingers. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, staring at that dot, watching it stay perfectly still, not moving around like she was in a meeting, not bouncing between locations like she was working, just sitting there, stationary, in a hotel room. "Emergency meeting, my ass," I muttered, grabbing my keys. The drive downtown took 15 minutes through empty streets lined with closed shops and flickering streetlights. Our city had seen better days, back when the factories were running and people had money to spend. Now half the storefronts were empty, and the Grand Metropolitan stood out like a diamond in a pile of coal. I parked across the street and studied the building. 30 floors of glass and steel, valet parking, doormen in fancy uniforms. The kind of place where pharmaceutical reps and regional managers went to impress clients, or to screw other people's wives. My hands shook as I walked into the lobby. The desk clerk, a skinny kid with perfect hair, looked at me like I'd tracked mud on his marble floors. My work clothes and calloused hands didn't exactly fit the clientele. "I need a room," I said. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" "No, but I've got cash." That magic word opened doors. 20 minutes later, I had a key card to room 1247, 1 floor above where my wife's phone said she was staying. The elevator ride felt like it lasted an hour. I found room 1147 and pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. No voices, no movement, no sound at all. Either they were asleep or... I knocked. 3 sharp raps, footsteps, a muffled voice saying, "Just a minute." Then the door opened, and there was Rina, wearing a hotel bathrobe that was way too big for her. Her hair was messy, her lipstick was gone, and her face went white as a sheet when she saw me. "Joel, what are you doing here?" I looked past her into the room. 2 wine glasses on the table, a man's jacket draped over a chair, expensive shoes by the bed, the kind of Italian leather that cost more than I made in a week. "Emergency meeting?" I asked, pulling out my phone and hitting record. "I can explain." "Don't." I held up my hand. "Just don't." A toilet flushed in the bathroom. Water ran in the sink. Someone was trying very hard to stay hidden. "Check your email," I said, then turned and walked away. Her voice followed me down the hall. "Joel, wait! It's not what you think." But it was exactly what I thought, and I had it all on video. I sat in my truck across the street for another hour, watching the hotel entrance. At 1:23 a.m., a man in an expensive suit slipped out the side door, looking around nervously before hurrying to a silver BMW parked in the shadows. Evan Lorne. I recognized him from Rina's company Christmas party last year. Pharmaceutical sales rep, smooth talker, the kind of guy who wore cologne that cost more than my monthly car payment. He'd spent half that party talking to my wife while I stood around making small talk with accountants and middle managers. "That's right, Run, you discount James Bond," I said to my empty truck. I pulled out my phone and started typing an email to Rina's district manager, a hard-nosed woman named Patricia Wells, who'd made it clear she didn't tolerate unprofessional behavior from her employees. The subject line read, "Urgent Employee Misconduct Report." I attached the video, added a few choice screenshots from the location sharing app, and included the hotel receipt I'd photographed at the front desk. Then I hit send and drove home through the empty streets, planning my next move, because this was just the beginning. I woke up at 6 a.m. to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from Rina. The preview screen showed a greatest hits collection of panic. "Please call me. Let me explain. You don't understand." And my personal favorite, "How could you do this to me? How could I do this to her?" That was rich. I made coffee and scrolled through the messages while eggs sizzled in the pan. Each text was more desperate than the last, building to a crescendo of blame-shifting and victim-playing that would have impressed a politician. My phone rang again. Rina's picture filled the screen, that same wedding photo we'd used for 5 years. I let it go to voicemail. By 7:30, I was at Carver Automotive, the shop I'd inherited from my dad 3 years ago. It wasn't much to look at. 2 service bays, a small office, and a waiting area with chairs older than disco. But it was mine. The smell of motor oil and brake fluid was more comforting than any expensive hotel room. Mick Rodriguez was already there, bent over the engine of a 2015 Honda Civic. He'd worked for my dad for 15 years and stayed on when I took over. Mick was the kind of friend who'd help you move a body without asking questions, though I'd never needed that particular service. "You look like hell," he said without looking up from the engine. "Feel worse?" I grabbed my coveralls from the hook by the door. "Rina's cheating." That got his attention. Mick straightened up, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "You sure? Caught them at the Grand Metropolitan last night, got it on video." "Damn, Joel, I'm sorry." "Don't be." "I'm not." That was a lie. I was sorry, but not in the way people expected. I was sorry I'd wasted 5 years on someone who thought I was annoying. Sorry I'd worked double shifts to pay for her business clothes and networking dinners. Sorry I'd believed her when she said she was building a career for our future. Mostly, I was sorry I hadn't seen it coming sooner. "What's the plan?" Mick asked. "Full engine rebuild, strip it down to the frame and see what's worth saving." He nodded, like that made perfect sense, which is why I liked him. Mechanics understand that some things can't be fixed, only replaced. My phone buzzed with another call from Rina. I declined it and pulled up our joint banking app instead. We'd combined finances when we got married, back when I thought sharing everything was romantic. Now it was just convenient. "Holy shit," I muttered, staring at the screen. "What?" "She spent $800 at Victoria's Secret last month. Another $600 at some fancy restaurant I've never heard of. Look at this. $200 on wine. The good stuff, not the cheap bottles we drink at home." Mick peered over my shoulder. "She's been planning this for a while." "Yeah, with my money." I spent the next hour transferring funds from our joint account to my personal checking, leaving just enough to cover the mortgage and utilities. Then I called our credit card companies and removed her as an authorized user. It wasn't vindictive. It was practical. If she wanted to finance her affair, she could do it with her own paycheck. My phone rang again. This time it was Patricia Wells, Rina's boss. Mr. Carver? This is Patricia Wells from Meridian Retail Group. I received your email this morning. Yes, ma'am. I need to ask you some questions about the information you provided. Are you available to speak? Absolutely. Patricia Wells was all business, the kind of woman who'd clawed her way up the corporate ladder by being smarter and tougher than everyone around her. She asked pointed questions about dates, times, and locations. She wanted to know how long I suspected the affair had been going on and whether I had any other evidence of inappropriate behavior. I told her about the mysterious overnight trips, the sudden interest in expensive clothes, and the way Rina had started working late every night for the past 2 months. Patricia listened without comment, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. Mr. Carver, I want you to know that Meridian Retail Group takes these matters very seriously. We have strict policies regarding employee conduct, especially when it involves potential conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest? Mr. Lorne is a pharmaceutical sales representative. His company is bidding on a contract to supply our employee health clinics. If Ms. Carver has been involved with him romantically while participating in the vendor selection process, that constitutes a serious ethical violation. I hadn't known about the contract, but it explained a lot. Evan hadn't just been screwing my wife. He'd been using her to get inside information on a business deal. What happens now? I asked. I'll be conducting a full investigation. Ms. Carver has been suspended pending the outcome. After she hung up, I sat in my office chair feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Satisfaction. Not happiness exactly, but the grim pleasure of watching karma finally show up to work. Mick knocked on the doorframe. Everything okay? Getting better. Rina just got suspended. Damn, she's going to be pissed. She's going to be broke too. I cleaned out the joint account this morning. Cold, man. I like it. Around noon, Mrs. Gertz from the house next door to mine called. She was 73 years old and knew everything that happened in our neighborhood within 5 minutes of it happening. Joel, honey, there's a woman banging on your front door. She's been out there for 20 minutes screaming about being locked out. Let her scream. Should I call the police? Only if she tries to break something. Otherwise, let her figure it out. Mrs. Gertz cackled like a witch. I always liked you better than her anyway. She never returned my casserole dish. I'd changed the locks at 6 a.m. right after I got home from the hotel. It was my house. I'd inherited it from my parents, but Rina's name was on the deed because we were married. That meant she had legal rights to the property, but not to my keys. My phone buzzed with a text. Why won't the key work? What did you do? I typed back. Change the locks. Your stuff is in the garage. That was partially true. I'd moved her clothes and personal items to the garage, but I'd left them in garbage bags on the concrete floor. If she wanted her designer shoes, she could dig through black plastic like everyone else. The afternoon brought a steady stream of phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Rina had apparently enlisted her friends and family to plead her case. I let them all go to voicemail and spent the time reviewing security camera footage from the shop. That's when I found the smoking gun. 3 weeks ago at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, Rina had brought someone to the shop. The cameras showed her unlocking the front door and leading a man in an expensive suit back to my office. They stayed for 47 minutes. Evan Lorne had been in my shop, sitting in my chair, probably getting a private tour while I was at home making dinner for a wife who was already planning to betray me. Snake, I muttered, saving the footage to a flash drive. My phone rang again. This time, it was a number I recognized. Tasha Williams, Rina's assistant and office gossip. She was 29 years old and treated the workplace like her personal soap opera. Joel, it's Tasha. I just wanted to call and say how sorry I am about everything. Thanks. I had no idea Rina was, you know, if I'd known, I would have said something. That was interesting. Tasha was ambitious and calculating, the kind of person who collected secrets like trading cards. If she was calling to distance herself from Rina, it meant she'd already decided which side was going to win. I appreciate that, Tasha. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. I've always thought you were too good for her. After she hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled for the first time in weeks. The rats were abandoning the ship, and I hadn't even started sinking it yet. By Thursday morning, the gossip mill was running at full capacity. Tasha had apparently decided that discretion was overrated because everyone in Rina's office knew about the suspension and the hotel incident. My phone kept buzzing with updates from people I barely knew, all eager to share the latest developments in the Carver marriage drama. "Did you hear Rina tried to get into the building at 6 a.m.? Tasha texted me. Security had to escort her out. Patricia Wells called an emergency meeting with HR, came another message from someone whose number I didn't recognize. Evan Lorne's wife found out. She showed up at his office screaming, reported Mrs. Gertz, who somehow had connections everywhere in town. I was enjoying the show, but it was time to move to the next phase. Passive revenge was satisfying, but I needed something more direct. Something that would make it clear that Joel Carver wasn't the kind of man you could walk all over. I found Evan at Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar downtown where pharmaceutical reps definitely didn't usually drink. He was sitting alone in a corner booth, nursing a whiskey and looking like his world had collapsed, which, to be fair, it probably had. I bought a beer at the bar and walked over to his table. "Mind if I sit?" He looked up with red eyes. "Joel, I was wondering when you'd show up." "Were you?" I slid into the booth across from him. "That's interesting. Most people would have left town by now." "I'm not most people." "No, you're the guy screwing my wife. That makes you special." Evan tried to look tough, but his hands were shaking. "Look, I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed. "I'm not angry, Evan. I'm impressed. It takes real skill to destroy 2 marriages and a business deal all at the same time." "What do you want?" "I want to know how long you've been planning this. Was it just a fair, or were you trying to get information about the vendor contract too?" His face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Rina's been feeding you inside information on the bidding process. That's why Patricia Wells suspended her. Conflict of interest. Your company's probably going to lose that contract now, which means your commission goes away too." I pulled out my phone and showed him the security footage from my shop. "Nice suit, by the way. Is that what pharmaceutical reps wear when they're planning to screw over mechanics?" Evan stared at the screen. "You can't prove anything." "I don't have to prove anything. The damage is already done. Your wife knows, your company knows, and pretty soon everyone in this town will know that Evan Lorne is the kind of man who cheats on his wife with married women to get ahead in business." I finished my beer and stood up. "Stay away from Rina, stay away from my shop, and if I see you anywhere near my house, I'll introduce you to some tools that aren't designed for fixing cars." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm educating you. There's a difference." I walked away, leaving him alone with his whiskey and his regrets. Outside Murphy's Tavern, I called Mick. "You still have that tow truck?" "Yeah, why?" "I need to repo something." Rina's car was a 2019 Honda Accord that we'd bought together 2 years ago. Both our names were on the title, which meant I had every legal right to take it. The fact that she'd used it to drive to hotels for her affair was just poetic justice. We found it parked outside a coffee shop downtown. Rina was inside, probably meeting with a lawyer or trying to convince someone to lend her money. I had Mick hook it up to the tow truck, while I left a note on the windshield of the car parked next to it. "If you're looking for a cheating wife, try the Grand Metropolitan Hotel." By the time we got back to the shop, my phone was ringing nonstop. Rina had discovered her car was gone and was not handling it well. "You can't just steal my car," she screamed when I finally answered. "I didn't steal it. I repossessed it. There's a difference." That's my car! Actually, it's our car. And since you've been using it to cheat on me, I figured it was time for a custody change. I need that car for work. What work? You got suspended, remember? The line went quiet for a moment. Then, I hate you. I know. But you should have thought about that before you decided I was annoying. I hung up and turned off my phone. It was time for the next phase of my plan. Detective Ray Garrison had been my father's friend for 30 years. He was close to retirement, the kind of cop who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. When I called and asked if he wanted to grab dinner, he suggested a diner near the police station. "You look like hell, kid," he said when I slid into the booth across from him. "Feel worse. Rina's cheating." Ray nodded like he'd been expecting this conversation. "I figured something was up when I saw her at the Grand Metropolitan last week." "You saw her?" "I was working a case, insurance fraud investigation. Saw her in the lobby with some guy in an expensive suit." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Not my place, but I'm sorry it worked out this way." I told him about the affair, the suspension, and my various acts of revenge. Ray listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions about dates and details. "You're walking a fine line," he said finally. "What you've done so far is legal, but if you escalate much further, you could end up in trouble." "I'm not planning to hurt anyone." "Good, because Evan Lorne filed a complaint this afternoon. Says you threatened him at Murphy's Tavern." My stomach dropped. "Are you going to arrest me?" "For what? Having a conversation? The bartender says you bought a beer, sat down for 10 minutes, and left. Doesn't sound like a threat to me." Ray leaned forward. "But Joel, you need to be smart about this. Rina's going to try to paint you as the bad guy. Don't give her ammunition." "What do you suggest?" "Document everything. Keep records. And remember that the best revenge is living well." After dinner, I drove home to find Rina's car parked in my driveway. She was sitting on the front porch, looking defeated. "We need to talk," she said when I got out of my truck. "No, we don't." "Joel, please. I know I screwed up, but we can work through this." I walked past her to the front door. "Work through what? The cheating? The lying? The part where you used my money to buy lingerie for another man?" "It wasn't like that." "What was it like, Rina? Explain it to me." She started crying, which was probably supposed to make me feel guilty. Instead, it just made me tired. "I was lonely," she said. "You work all the time, and when you come home, you don't want to talk about anything but cars. So you decided to talk to Evan Lorne instead. It just happened. Bullshit. Affairs don't just happen. You made choices. You chose to meet him. You chose to lie to me. You chose to spend our money on hotel rooms." I unlocked the front door. "Your stuff is still in the garage. Take it and go." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care. Call Evan. I'm sure he's got room at the Grand Metropolitan." "He won't return my calls." That stopped me. "What?" "He won't return my calls. Ever since Patricia Wells started the investigation, he's been avoiding me." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Congratulations," I said. "You destroyed our marriage for a guy who dumped you the minute things got complicated. That's got to be some kind of record." I went inside and locked the door behind me, leaving her on the porch with her tears and her regrets. Friday morning brought news that made my coffee taste better than it had in months. Tasha called at 7 a.m., practically vibrating with excitement. "Joel, you're not going to believe this. Evan's wife showed up at our office yesterday afternoon with a lawyer. No kidding. She had copies of hotel receipts, credit card statements, everything. Turns out Evan's been cheating for years, not just with Rina. There was a whole parade of women." I sat up straighter. "How many women?" "At least 4 that she could prove. All of them connected to business deals somehow. The man was running a one-person escort service, except he was the one getting paid." This was better than I'd hoped. Rina wasn't just a cheating wife. She was one of many, which meant Evan had been playing her the whole time. "There's more," Tasha continued. Patricia Wells called an emergency meeting with Meridian's legal department. They're considering filing charges for corporate espionage. Corporate espionage? Evan's company got confidential information about the bidding process, information that only Rina had access to. The lawyers think it was systematic, not just pillow talk, but actual industrial espionage. I hung up feeling like I'd won the lottery. Rina hadn't just destroyed our marriage for a fling, she'd committed potential felonies for a man who was using her like a cheap tool. My good mood lasted until I got to the shop and found my office window smashed. Glass covered the floor, and someone had spray-painted "asshole" across my desk in red letters. Mick was already there, sweeping up the mess. "Security cameras caught it all," he said, handing me his phone. The footage showed Rina pulling up at 3:17 a.m. in her Honda Accord. She got out with a baseball bat and went to work on my window like she was trying to hit a home run. Then she grabbed a can of spray paint from her car and decorated my office. "She's lost her mind," I said, watching her swing the bat with surprising accuracy. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" I called Ray Garrison and sent him the security footage. He arrived 20 minutes later, looking like a man who'd seen this movie too many times. "Vandalism, destruction of property, probably criminal mischief," he said, studying the damage. "You want to press charges?" "Damn right I do." "You sure? Once I arrest her, there's no taking it back." I looked at my destroyed office, at the word "asshole" dripping down my desk, and made my decision. "Do it." Ray sighed. "I'll put out a warrant. She'll probably turn herself in once her lawyer explains the situation." "And if she doesn't? Then we'll go find her." While Ray was filling out paperwork, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Joel, this is Patricia Wells. I need to speak with you immediately." "What's wrong?" "Rina came to my house last night. She was drunk, angry, and making threats. She said you'd destroyed her life and that she was going to destroy yours." "What kind of threats?" "She said she was going to tell everyone you were abusive, that you'd been hitting her for years and she was finally ready to speak up." "That's a lie." "I know it's a lie. I've seen the evidence of her affair, and I've seen how you've conducted yourself throughout this situation. But Joel, she's desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things." After Patricia hung up, I sat in my broken office and tried to process what was happening. Rina wasn't just angry. She was planning to destroy me with false accusations. In today's world, an accusation of domestic abuse could ruin a man's life, even if it was completely fabricated. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. Detective Garrison arrived with a female officer I didn't recognize. They spent an hour photographing my office, documenting the damage, and taking my statement about Rina's increasingly erratic behavior. "She's escalating," the female officer said. "First the affair, then the vandalism, now threats of false accusations. Classic pattern." "What do I do?" "Document everything," Ray said. "Every phone call, every text message, every contact. And stay away from her. Don't give her any opportunity to claim you threatened or intimidated her." "What if she shows up here?" "Call us immediately. Don't engage, don't argue, just call." That afternoon, Rina made her next move. She showed up at Murphy's Tavern during happy hour, when the place was packed with people from the downtown business district. According to 3 different witnesses who called me, she stood on a table and announced that her husband was an abusive monster who'd been beating her for years. "He threatened to eliminate me," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I've been hiding the bruises, but I can't take it anymore." The performance was Oscar-worthy, except for one small problem. Murphy's Tavern had security cameras, and they showed Rina practicing her speech in the parking lot for 10 minutes before she went inside. The bartender, a guy named Tommy who'd known me since high school, called me immediately. "Joel, you need to see this. She's out there rehearsing like it's a damn play." "You got it on camera?" "Every word. She even did multiple takes." I drove to Murphy's and found a crowd gathered outside. Some people looked sympathetic to Rina, but others seemed skeptical. Tommy met me at the door with a flash drive. "It's all here," he said. "The rehearsal, the performance, everything." "Where is she now?" "Gone. Left right after she finished her speech." "But Joel, some people believed her. You need to be careful." I spent the evening at Ray Garrison's house, going over my options with him and his wife, Carol, who'd been a family court judge for 20 years. "False allegations are serious business," Carol said. "Even if you can prove they're lies, the damage to your reputation can be permanent." "So what do I do?" "Fight back with facts," Ray said. "You've got security footage, witness statements, and a clear timeline showing her escalating behavior. But you need to be proactive." Meaning? "Meaning you need to get ahead of this story before she does any more damage." Carol leaned forward. "Joel, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. Have you ever laid a hand on Rina in anger?" "Never." "Have you ever threatened her with violence?" "No." "Have you ever done anything that could be construed as intimidating or controlling?" I thought about it carefully. "I changed the locks on my house and took her name off our joint accounts, but that was after I caught her cheating." "That's not abuse," Carol said. "That's protecting yourself." Ray stood up. "Then we fight. We gather every piece of evidence we can find, and we show the world exactly who Rina Carver really is." "How?" "Leave that to me." Saturday morning, I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed and wife beater spray painted across the windshield. Rina was escalating again, but this time she'd made a mistake. My neighbor across the street, an insomniac named Pete, had been sitting on his porch smoking cigarettes at 4 a.m. when she struck. "Saw the whole thing," Pete told me, handing over his phone. "Recorded it too. Figured you might need evidence." The video was crystal clear. Rina creeping up to my truck with a knife and a can of spray paint, looking around nervously before going to work. She even paused to take a selfie with her handiwork, which was either incredibly stupid or incredibly crazy. "Thanks, Pete. I owe you one. Just get that psycho away from our neighborhood. She's scaring the kids." I called Ray Garrison, who arrived with backup and a very official-looking warrant. "Time to end this," he said, studying Pete's video. We found Rina at her sister's house across town, hiding in the basement like a fugitive. She came up swinging, screaming about police harassment and demanding to see a lawyer. Ray cuffed her professionally while reading her rights. "This is all his fault," she yelled, pointing at me. "He destroyed my life." "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," Ray said calmly. "I suggest you use it." As they loaded her into the police car, Rina made one last desperate play. "He beats me!" she screamed to the growing crowd of neighbors. "He's been beating me for years!" An elderly woman in the crowd shook her head. "Honey, if he was beating you, you wouldn't be strong enough to slash his tires." Even Rina's sister looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Joel. She's been staying here for 3 days, drinking and ranting about revenge. I should have called someone." "It's not your fault. She kept saying she was going to make you pay. I didn't think she meant it literally." The arrest made the local news, complete with footage of Rina's meltdown and interviews with witnesses who'd seen her practicing her abuse allegations at Murphy's Tavern. The reporter, a sharp young woman named Jessica Chen, had done her homework. "Police say Mrs. Carver's allegations of domestic abuse appear to be fabricated," Jessica reported. "Security footage from multiple locations shows her rehearsing her accusations and vandalizing her estranged husband's property." The story included interviews with people who knew us both. Mrs. Gertz called Rina a manipulative little liar who never returned my casserole dish. Tommy from Murphy's Tavern described the rehearsal footage as the worst acting I've ever seen. Even Tasha got in on the action, telling the reporter that Rina had been obsessed with getting revenge ever since her suspension. But the real bombshell came from an unexpected source: Evan Lorne's wife, Margaret. Margaret Lorne was a successful attorney who'd built her career prosecuting white-collar criminals. When she discovered her husband's affairs, she'd done what any good prosecutor would do. She'd gathered evidence. "My husband has been using women to gain business advantages for years," she told Jessica Chen. Rina Carver was just his latest victim, though she was also a willing participant in corporate espionage. The interview revealed that Evan had recorded his conversations with Rina, including several where she provided confidential information about the vendor selection process. Margaret had turned the recordings over to both Meridian Retail Group and the FBI. "Rina thought she was having an affair," Margaret said. "In reality, she was committing federal crimes. I watched the news report from Ray Garrison's office, where I'd been giving my final statement about the vandalism charges." Ray whistled low when Margaret Lorne dropped her bombshell. "Federal crimes. That's a whole different level of trouble. What happens now?" "Now? Now you go home and let the system work. Rina's looking at state charges for vandalism and filing false police reports, plus potential federal charges for corporate espionage. She's going to be busy with lawyers for the next few years. And Evan? His wife's divorcing him and taking half his assets. His company fired him this morning, and if the FBI decides to prosecute, he's looking at serious prison time." I drove home in a rental car, past the reporters who'd gathered outside my house. Mrs. Gertz was holding court on her front porch, telling anyone who'd listen about Rina's character flaws and my sterling reputation. "That boy never gave me a moment's trouble," she was saying to a camera crew. "Fixed my garbage disposal for free, shoveled my driveway every winter. If he was abusive, I'm the Queen of England." Inside my house, I sat in my father's old recliner and tried to process what had happened. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a married man with a cheating wife. Now I was single, vindicated, and watching my ex-wife's life implode on the evening news. My phone rang. Tasha Williams, calling with an update. "Joel, you're not going to believe this. Patricia Wells just called an all-hands meeting. Rina's been officially terminated, and they're promoting me to district manager. Congratulations. I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't exposed her affair, I never would have gotten this opportunity. You earned it yourself, Tasha. You were smart enough to pick the winning side. Still, I owe you. If you ever need anything, just ask." After she hung up, I walked out to my garage and looked at the garbage bags full of Rina's belongings. Designer clothes, expensive shoes, jewelry I'd bought for anniversaries and birthdays. All of it sitting in black plastic like the trash it had become. I loaded the bags into my rental car and drove to the women's shelter downtown. The director, a kind woman named Sarah, accepted the donation gratefully. "These are beautiful clothes," she said, examining a dress that had cost me $300. "Our clients will be so grateful. Just make sure they go to women who deserve them. They all deserve them, Mr. Carver. That's why they're here." On Sunday morning, I woke up to silence. No phone calls, no text messages, no drama. Just the sound of birds outside my window and the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. I drove to Carver Automotive and found Mick installing a new window in my office. The spray paint was gone, the glass was clean, and everything looked normal again. "Thought you might want a fresh start," he said, stepping back to admire his work. "Thanks, Mick. What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Consider it a divorce present." We spent the morning working on a 1967 Mustang that had been sitting in the back bay for months. It was a complete restoration job, the kind of project that required patience, skill, and attention to detail. The kind of work that reminded me why I loved fixing things. Around noon, Detective Garrison stopped by with paperwork and updates. "Rina made bail this morning," he said. "But she's got conditions. No contact with you, no coming within 500 feet of your home or business, and she has to surrender her passport." Think she'll violate the order? I think she's finally figured out that she's in real trouble. Her lawyer probably explained that false police reports are felonies, and federal espionage charges don't go away with community service. What about Evan? FBI arrested him yesterday. Turns out the recordings his wife found were just the tip of the iceberg. They've been investigating him for months. Ray handed me a business card. Divorce attorney. She's good, and she owes me a favor. Call her tomorrow. I thought I might represent myself. Joel, you're about to be a single man with a successful business and no criminal record. Rina's about to be a convicted felon with no job and federal charges pending. This divorce should be straightforward, but you want it done right. That evening, I sat on my front porch with a beer and watched the sunset. Mrs. Gertz was watering her flowers, humming some old song I didn't recognize. Pete was across the street, working on his motorcycle. Normal neighborhood sounds from normal people living normal lives. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry. I knew it was Rina, probably using a friend's phone to get around the no-contact order. I stared at those two words for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. Sorry didn't cover the lies, the cheating, the vandalism, or the false accusations. Sorry didn't repair the damage to my reputation or give me back the money she'd spent on her affair. Sorry was just a word people used when they got caught. I deleted the message without responding and blocked the number. On Monday morning, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Jessica Chen called with news that made me smile for the first time in weeks. The FBI has charged both Rina and Evan with conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, she said. If convicted, they're looking at up to 10 years in federal prison. 10 years? The recordings show they were systematically sharing confidential information for over 6 months. It wasn't just an affair, it was an organized criminal enterprise. What about Evan's other women? 2 of them have been charged as co-conspirators. Turns out Evan was running a whole network of corporate spies using romance to get business intelligence. I hung up and walked out to the shop floor, where Mick was rebuilding the engine on the Mustang. Clean parts laid out in perfect order, everything labeled and organized. Good news? He asked, looking up from his work. The best. Rina's going to federal prison. Damn, that's cold. That's justice. I picked up a wrench and got back to work, thinking about second chances and fresh starts. The Mustang had been rusted and broken when it came to me, but with enough time and effort, it would run like new. Some things could be restored. Others just needed to be scrapped. 3 months later, I was a free man. The divorce was final, the criminal charges were resolved, and Rina was serving 18 months in federal prison while awaiting trial on the espionage charges. Evan got 5 years and $1 million fine. His pharmaceutical company settled with Meridian Retail Group for an undisclosed amount, and Margaret Lorne got half of everything in their divorce. Tasha Williams sent me a Christmas card from her new office, thanking me again for creating the opportunity that launched her career. Patricia Wells retired early and moved to Florida, telling everyone that the Carver case had convinced her that corporate America was too corrupt for honest people. And me? I kept fixing cars because that's what I knew how to do. But I also learned something important about people. They'll show you who they really are if you pay attention to the warning signs. Rina had been making strange noises for months before the engine finally faded. I just hadn't been listening carefully enough. But I was listening now, and I'd never make that mistake again. The last bill had been paid in full.